All right, so our annual missions contribution will be next week on the 25th. I will not actually be here. That wasn't my originally planned, but my son Carl made me an offer that I didn't want to refuse. So I'll be with him next weekend, next Sunday. But anyway, next week will be the contribution for our missions. It'll be separate from the regular contribution, as I've mentioned before. So if you don't mark your check to be for missions, it will go into our regular funds. So to contribute for missions, please provide a check that is marked specifically for missions. And then when all the checks have been collected, sometime in the middle of December, I will put all the money together and write checks to our works. So last week, I talked about our work in Ukraine, and the week before that, we talked about Greece. Today, I'm going to talk about the remaining highlights, and I will try not to take too much time to go through them so that we'll have time afterwards for people to ask questions, some of which I may not be able to answer on the spot, but I can get back to you with the answer. So today, we're going to talk about GAPE Asia, which formerly was called the China Mission, Partners in Progress, which is Southeast Asia, the India Mission, and the Boston Center for Pregnancy Choices. So next slide, please. So GAPE Asia is a very large work. It originally comprised 5 orphanages in China that were started by Ron Brown, working with the Chinese government. Unfortunately, the current regime has closed down one of them. The other 4 are still going well, and we can be praying that the regime will change its mind. It's really not to their advantage to close the orphanages, because we really are helping the government in doing this work. There's a hospital in China that was established, and the director is a Christian. Of course, there's medical assistance, operations, burn victims, and so on, because obviously many of the children in China, especially the ones who are orphans, don't have the money to afford the care they need, and they don't have the kind of healthcare system that we have in the United States. As for how the children get to these places, there are house churches in China, and they are aware of what's going on in their communities. And when children become orphaned because of death of parents and things like that, they refer them to the centers. The Bibles are not illegal in China, and some of the children, as you may remember, do become Christians in these centers. Currently, the management is under Jeff Robertson. There's also a board of directors, and GAPE Asia has partners that help them with their work: the Mayo Clinic, Children's Hospital in Boston, Rotary, and many others. You could go to their website and actually look at the list of the various organizations that help support them. So last time I presented about them, I noted that their purview has expanded beyond China. Nepal, Myanmar or Burma, and Mongolia. Now they've added another one, which is actually in India. And it's called the India Discipleship Network. And they've joined GAPE Asia. So they're part of their organization now. And I'll talk about them a little bit later. Next slide. So here are pictures. These are actually the same pictures from last year, but nothing has changed as far as these are concerned. There's a picture of the little children in the care center in Guangxi. And of course, there's a picture of all the cute little children. Some of us I know are supporting orphans financially, something that we can do. It's not difficult. You can go to their site, or you can ask me as to how to get that going. For some of the older children, especially, education is very important. And of course, I mentioned operations. I believe the little girl in the picture had a heart defect that was corrected. Next slide. So what is the India Discipleship Network? I don't know a lot about this. It was started by a Christian man, Ray Hooper, is a graduate of the Harding Graduate School of Religion. I don't know a lot about it, but it's fairly active. It's been doing a lot of different things. The various ministries are listed there, including a girls' home. And that picture at the bottom is the Bethany girls and staff. So happy little girls. There are a lot of orphans in India as well as in China. And that's a major part of the Asian work in general, is helping to take care of these little children who have nowhere to go. And the governments are either poor or unwilling to do what needs to be done for them. Next slide. So COVID-19, of course, is a worldwide epidemic. It has caused various issues, of course, for all of our mission works. In general, my impression is that they've done well with it. But in Mongolia, it's been especially difficult. I don't know how much you know about Mongolia, but the traditional people in Mongolia, they live in basically tents. They're called yurts, and they're nomadic. They move around from one part of the country to the other to move their livestock around. They raise animals. They're partly agricultural. And so as a result, it's hard to keep in touch with some of the families. They move and they don't tell the post office. So the whereabouts and status health-wise of some of the families is currently unknown. And this is something that the Agape Asia is very concerned about and trying to deal with. On the more positive side, about 10 years ago, a little girl pictured here at various stages of her life, her name is Yang Li. She came into the centers there, one of them, about 10 years ago, and she now has completed her job. She's completed her degree. She's a college graduate with a degree in accounting. So that's pretty cool. Somebody taken all the way from being very young to being a college graduate, thanks to what Agape Asia and the supporters like us have been able to do. Next slide. So Partners in Progress, they have indeed made progress. About 70, actually more than 75 congregations now have been established in Cambodia just in the last 10 years. Bill and Marie Claire McDonough are still the leaders, although they're obviously not the only people involved, and they are, of course, training up some younger people as well to help them. It's a very multifaceted ministry. It's not limited to the Near East or the Far East, although that's what we've been supporting. We support the medical missions. That's how we earmark our checks to them. They are, of course, very evangelistic, but they're also very humanitarian. There are well-established works of theirs in Southeast Asia that you've heard about before. The Ship of Life, the floating water for purification plant on Tonle Sap Lake, the emergency rescue boat, which was a converted World War II PT boat, and not the PT boat, but these other two works also have classrooms. So they give physical care as well as spiritual care. In the lower right of this picture, you'll see a rain barrel baptism. This actually occurred in 2018. And the young woman being baptized there were actually two baptized that day. And I'll talk more about these young ladies a little bit later. Next slide. So here are just some pictures of their works. The lower right picture is a Bible study that's actually going on in the second floor of the water purification raft. You can see there that it's a two-story structure, and the top floor is a classroom. Pretty cool. I mean, view of the lake and study God's word, and drink pure water at the same time, which especially in many parts of Asia, pure water that's safe to drink is a very precious thing. I think we tend to take it for granted in the United States sometimes, but in many parts of the world, it is very, very precious indeed. Next picture. So I love this picture. One of the things I talked about last time was a training center that they were starting in Battambang in Cambodia. Very, very creative thing. It is, of course, an evangelistic program. They teach English basically, to help people learn English while studying the Bible is one of the things they do. But they also train people to be able to get jobs. There's a pastry baking school and an air conditioning technician school, which are, I was talking with my son Eric yesterday, and those two things don't seem to be very closely related. How'd they come up with that? Well, they identified needs in the economy, and where young people could get jobs. They obviously were not going to start a full-scale university. They really don't have the resources for that. But it turns out that making pastries is something that's popular there, I guess a growing business. And so pictured are, there are 6 graduates. 3 of them are young men, 3 of them are young women. And they're there proudly showing their certificates. So I thought you'd like to know what's been promised has actually happened there. They actually did succeed in building this very unusual way of serving the community as well as reaching out for Christ. Next slide, please. So the India mission has been going on for quite a while. Ron and Karen Clayton started the work. I think it's been more than 30 years ago now. They're still involved. Kyle, their son, as you may remember, married an Indian woman, and he is now the principal in-country lead. The way they work is they basically train nationals to become evangelists, and there are 50,000 preachers associated with the work. So that's how they baptize thousands of people, and this is how they do it. They have a very large staff of local Indians. We're not paying for Americans, 50,000 Americans to go over there. This is a better way to do it because, of course, they're native Indians. There's a conscious effort to reach rural areas. So you'll see at the bottom of the picture, there are preachers with bicycles. That's actually part of what this work does. If you give money to the work and you don't tell them what you want them to do it for, some of the money will probably go to buy bicycles because that's an economical way and a safe way to get around. And a lot of the paths and dirt paths they have in India, you can't really drive a car on them, maybe an SUV, which most of them can't afford. Of course, there are orphanages in India. The funds that we send, they go towards teaching efforts and supplies, including bicycles. In general, the congregations are self-supporting, as they would need to be with this number of people becoming Christians. Quite a few of the conversions result from the conversions of denominational ministers. It's part of the way that this, in fact, is a very large part of the way this ministry works. They do all this work on a budget of about $2 million a year, which sounds like a lot. But when you consider how much the typical church budget is, let's say it's $50,000 a year. Well, okay, so $1 million is 20 churches. Well, they're converting thousands of people. So money-wise is an extremely effective outreach program. And their website says a little bit more about them, and it's listed there on the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. So these are just some pictures. The bottom slide, I don't know if you can read it, but it says, "Is this crowded?" That's effectively a bus. That's a rural bus. I mean, it doesn't look like a bus, but that's what it is. It's basically a flatbed truck. And if you've seen other pictures of India, buses that are actually buses, there are people hanging onto the side of the bus. This is obviously would not be permitted in most Western countries for safety reasons, but that's what they do. They pack them in like sardines. They'll hang off the sides, and some of the buses, they sit on the top of the bus. So India is a very, very crowded and also a very interesting place, I think, as these pictures show. Next slide. Unfortunately, COVID, India being a very crowded and very poor place, has been a real problem there. In fact, as far as we really don't know, I don't know that anyone really knows how many cases there are, because many of these rural areas that this mission work serves, I mean, they don't have internet service. Telephones are typically cell phones. if the people are wealthy enough to have them. Television sets are rare. It is very difficult to get an accurate count of people, and of course, difficult to get medical supplies to them. And obviously, it's affected their economy. And this is true in the United States. The people that tend to be affected the most by this sort of thing are often the very poorest people. So this is something definitely to pray for. That things have opened up a little bit. This is the most recent news I have, and it's back in June. So I don't know exactly where things are now, but I know that back in June, religious gatherings and weddings, they had started to have them again. Many of the brethren there are working around the situation by meeting in their homes, or meeting very early in the morning or at night. So it's a struggle there. We definitely need to be praying for how this pandemic is affecting India. Next slide. So finally, our own Boston Center for Pregnancy Choices. This is the only center like this in Boston. And unfortunately, preventing abortion is unpopular, which is horrible, but it's true. And what these people do is they counsel women and men, by the way, who are involved, the husbands or the boyfriends, on alternatives to abortion. And there are alternatives, and they don't have to cost anything. The services are offered free of charge. There's counseling for prospective parents, the ones who hopefully decide to have their children. Fatherhood is encouraged. Free ultrasounds can be arranged. And I heard, I don't have all the information, maybe I should have put it in the slide, but I heard recently, and I'm supposed to get a video, a real live video of what happens during an abortion, which is a horrible thing to watch. And there's an activity, I don't know where it is right now, to actually distribute this video to colleges. Now, what was claimed in the report I read was that young people, because of technology, are starting to change their minds about what a good idea abortion is, because technology has allowed people to see for themselves that, no, this isn't just a blob, that's in there, that this is in fact a human being, and which is a wonderful thing. So free ultrasounds can be arranged. They don't do it there. They refer to local medical clinics they have connections with. So of course there's information, they can refer them to other counseling centers and so on. It opens up to these young women and men a network of help, which is very hard to find in Boston if you're considering an abortion. Of course, another thing you don't hear much about, but it's obviously true, is that women who do go through abortion often suffer emotionally. Guilt, is a horrible thing for a lot of these women. And they're being told they shouldn't feel guilty, but that doesn't help. They do. The Boston Center is non-denominational. We're not the only church that supports it. It is clearly faith-based, Christian principles. I believe there are also some synagogues that support it, so it's not even necessarily just Christian. COVID has not slowed them down. It hasn't changed anything as far as the situations with abortions. And there were 160 client visits in March through August, which is, well, we hope the peak of COVID-19 occurred in that period. But in any case, they've been very active in spite of COVID-19, and I'm sure they're following all the guidelines. So that's the end of my slides. If there are questions or comments, be glad to take them at this time.
Jeff, I got a question. We talked, I guess, 4 or 5 years back about Dave Pomerantz and the Save the Stork project. I think he was based out of Houston, but had gotten some ultrasound buses in New York. And about 2 years back, I know that the Boston Center for Pregnancy was looking at getting one of those buses, but was having zoning issues. Do you know if that's still in the plans, or whether that's happening, or is that a dead end?
I don't believe it's happened. Part of the problem was that they did not have a physician on staff. And you can't just be a counseling center. You have to be a medical facility. And so they had a doctor who affiliated with them who would have met that requirement. He left. They now have another one. But part of what was going on was the people in the neighborhood, they didn't, yeah, you're right. That was an issue. And I don't believe they've solved it. They didn't want it to be zoned as a full-fledged medical facility, which they would have to be in order to operate one of these vans. So what they've done instead is to partner with various clinics in the city to offer ultrasounds. So that's their workaround. But no, and that's something to pray for, Chris. I still pray for that they could have stork buses down there. I think it'd be wonderful. But so far, they still don't have them. But you know what? I will make a note to ask and see where that is. They have a new director. Sarah Loy isn't the director anymore. There's a man directing it now. But be that as it may.
So essentially the medical requirements for those running a stork bus and showing a baby has to be higher than that of the people actually doing the abortion is what you're describing, which is just frighteningly sad.
That's right. That's right. So yeah. But it's a good question, Chris. I wish I had the answer, and I wish I could say they have them, but they don't at this point, I'm pretty sure.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Anybody else? And, obviously you can talk to me anytime or email me.
All right, go ahead.
Jeff, I have a question. You had mentioned about in your slide about the Bibles were legal. What is the status on churches actually meeting in groups like a public type thing? Is that
In China?
Yeah, in China specifically.
So the new government is less friendly to religion in general, including Christianity, than the old government was. It used to be, and this is another question that I can look into because I don't know, but I know when Ron Brown was there, the only approved religion there was Catholicism, or Christian religion was Catholicism. And, I guess a little bit like Nazi Germany, they were under government control. They were limited as to what they could do there. Churches of Christ like ours, independent churches, I believe, are still illegal. And that's both good and bad. In my view, in a way, it's kind of good because the house churches are local. It basically enforces local evangelism, which they do. It also means that you can have close fellowship and, not have the sort of giant, the giant auditorium full of people, many of whom don't know each other, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But I personally think the fellowship is better in smaller groups. On the other hand, they are persecuted. I don't think it's as bad as Laos, where they literally will drag you out of the house and put you in jail, but they are still persecuted in China. But I can ask that question. I don't think it's changed. I think it's probably gotten worse.
So Jeff, Heather was asking a question I asked you before, I think, but other people may be interested. We had heard that the Ship of Life was shut down. It sounds like it's back up. Have you heard anything along those lines, or is that old news? Or
well, I never heard that it was shut down, but you might have better information than me. I did hear that because the Mekong River was getting too shallow to be able to operate the ship safely, and they were at least limited as to where they could go. And their solution was to kind of have smaller boats that would go out as kind of like satellite boats, was my understanding. There's nothing on their website about the Ship of Life being shut down. But on the other hand, it looks like their website hasn't been updated, at least for several months. So that's a question I can ask as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, I have a question. If we send a separate check to the church, does the money get distributed equally to all of these organizations we support? Does it go to a particular organization? Can you just share with us how that is
Yeah.
done?
So I think it was last year, you know, I for the first time, I actually, you know, invited people to, you know, say which works they wanted to support. There was actually very little response to that. I think one or two people took advantage of that. So my plan is to divide the work up equally among the works. If you really want to support just one work or two works or whatever you want to do, you can do that. The way you would do it is to write a check to that organization, and you would just do that. I can give you the address or the addresses, and you can do that on your own. But as far as the regular or as far as the special contribution is concerned, I was going to divide up the money amongst all of them because I got very little indication that people didn't like one work or, you know, wanted to give all their money to another one. But you can do it. You know, just contact me. I can give you the address and you can send the check to wherever you want it.
Jeff, thanks for explaining that. I'm fine with it going to all the works. I just wasn't sure how that was decided. So thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, yeah. Welcome.
Jeff, I want to say that I appreciate you doing the work you're doing to keep us informed about what we're doing. And it is a big thing. And we appreciate the work you're putting into it. And hopefully we'll all give so God will be blessed instead of us.
Well, amen to that. Okay, well, I guess we're done. Thanks for your attention.